In today's video, we will tell you about a man born to nomadic Bedouin parents, Muammar Gaddafi, and the top 5 worst crimes committed by him during the time period of his power. The son of an itinerant Bedouin farmer, Gaddafi was born in a tent in the Libyan desert. He proved a talented student and graduated from the University of Libya in 1963. A devout Muslim and ardent Arab nationalist, Gaddafi early began plotting to overthrow the Libyan monarchy of King Idris I. He graduated from the Libyan Military Academy in 1965 and thereafter rose steadily through the ranks, all the while continuing to plan a coup with the help of his fellow army officers. On September 1, 1969, Gaddafi seized control of the government in a military coup that deposed King Idris. Muammar Gaddafi became the de facto leader of Libya on 1 September 1969, after leading a group of young Libyan army officers against King Idris I. After the king had fled the country, the Revolutionary Command Council, headed by Gaddafi, abolished the monarchy and the old constitution and established the Libyan Arab Republic with the motto freedom, socialism, and unity. After coming to power, the RCC government initiated a process of directing funds toward providing education, healthcare, and housing for all. Public education in the country became free and primary education compulsory for both sexes. Medical care became available to the public at no cost, but providing housing for all was a task the RCC government was unable to complete. Under Gaddafi, per capita income in the country rose to more than $11,000, the 5th highest in Africa. The increase in prosperity was accompanied by a controversial foreign policy, and there was increased domestic political repression. But despite all these good works done by Muammar Gaddafi, there were several crimes that were committed by al-Gaddafi. So in this video, we will discuss the top 5 worst crimes that were committed by Muammar Gaddafi during his time period of ruling over Libya. Number 1. Allegations of mass rape. Nearly 300 women were reported to have been raped. The real number could be much higher, considering the stigma attached to rape victims in Libyan society. Every single woman in the survey who admitted to being raped said they were raped by loyalist soldiers or militiamen. The UN war crimes expert and Doctors Without Borders found no evidence of systematic rape conducted by the Libyan government. The Benghazi rebels had knowingly made false claims or manufactured evidence, quoting one example of pristine boxes of Viagra that the rebels said were found inside a totally burned-out tank belonging to Gaddafi's troops. This raised serious doubts about the claim that Gaddafi handed out Viagra to his soldiers to enable them to rape more efficiently. Physicians for Human Rights collected testimony from eyewitnesses who reported that pro-Gaddafi forces transformed an elementary school into a detention site, where they raped women and girls as young as 14 years old. PHR also reports of honor killings that occurred in response to these rapes. Number 2. Use of landmines as a means of war. Human Rights Watch has confirmed claims of rebels that pro-Gaddafi forces used landmines frequently during the conflict. It found them on at least 6 different locations in Libya, mostly on front lines of the Gaddafi forces. Among these landmines are not only anti-tank mines, but also anti-personnel mines, which can permanently pose a threat to civilians. Number 3. Shelling of civilian areas. Gaddafi's forces have been accused by human rights groups of shelling towns with heavy weapons, risking civilian lives indiscriminately. The most accusations refer to the siege of Misrata, accusing Gaddafi's forces of targeting hospitals and civilian areas, also using internationally outlawed cluster bombs of Spanish production as ammunition, having risked the lives of civilians. Number 4. Crimes against international humanitarian law. Execution of prisoners of war. A group of 15 to 22 Libyan army soldiers captured in Derna were reportedly executed in the neighboring village of Martuba, 20 kilometers, 12 miles. According to a widely circulated story, the men were claimed to have been executed by their own officers for disobeying orders. Another group of 15 dark-skinned Libyan prisoners were publicly executed by hanging in front of the Beta courthouse. Murder and torture of injured soldiers. On 17 February, the Beta hospital admitted 2 injured men, one of darker complexion and the other of olive complexion. The men were accused of fighting against the rebels. A hospital doctor claimed that the black man was murdered and hung by an angry mob that had gathered around the hospital. The other injured man was reportedly beaten, shot, and returned to the emergency room. Lootings and beatings. In 4 towns in the Western Mountains captured in June by the opposition, al-gaddafi noticed looting of private property and beatings of alleged Gaddafi sympathizers by rebel forces. The National Transitional Council then pledged to hold responsible the causes of the attacks and to prevent such abuses in the future. Killing of civilians. During the Battle of Sirte, the rebels killed many civilians, including men, women, and children, while there were also reports of the rebels harassing and stealing from the locals. According to one resident, the rebels are worse than rats. NATO is the same as Osama bin Laden. According to another local woman, we lived in democracy under Muammar Gaddafi. He was not a dictator. I lived in freedom. Libyan women had full human rights. It isn't that we need Muammar Gaddafi again, but we want to live just as we did before. A local elderly woman stated, "They are killing our children. Why are they doing this? For what? Life was good before." Number 5. Systematic shooting at protesters. Between 500 and 700 people were killed by Gaddafi's security forces in February 2011, before the rebels even took up arms. Shooting at protesters was systematic. The Libyan government denied that they ordered killings of demonstrators. In the early days of the uprising, they said that soldiers acted in self-defense as they were attacked by mobs. Al-Gaddafi forces committed serious violations of international humanitarian law, including war crimes and gross human rights violations, which point to the commission of crimes against humanity. They deliberately killed and injured scores of unarmed protesters, subjected perceived opponents and critics to enforced disappearance, torture, and other ill treatment, and arbitrarily detained scores of civilians. They launched indiscriminate attacks and attacks targeting civilians in their efforts to regain control of Misrata and territory in the east. They launched artillery, mortar, and rocket attacks against residential areas. They used inherently indiscriminate weapons, such as anti-personnel landmines and cluster bombs, including in residential areas. Gaddafi was a controversial and highly divisive world figure. Supporters lauded him for his willingness to tackle the unfair economic legacy of foreign domination, as well as his support of Pan-Africanism and Pan-Arabism. Conversely, he was internationally condemned as a dictator, whose authoritarian administration violated the human rights of Libyan citizens, persecuted dissidents abroad, and supported international terrorism.